they hear the word metrology, they think of the weather. That's meteorology, which is the study of weather. Metrology is the science of measurement and the accurate measurement of things. Metrology helps us to know how long something is. How much is a kilogram? Or how much is a liter? A shop should store milk at less than 4 degrees Celsius, and the gauge says that it is indeed 4 degrees. But is that gauge accurate? Or is it actually 7 degrees inside that fridge? And that's dangerous. If a factory is allowed to pump out 40 parts per million of carbon monoxide, how can we be sure that they're not actually pumping out more? Metrology is very important for all of us. Metrology involves something called traceability, but we'll get to that later. Your customers need to be happy when, for example, they buy bricks that they are indeed getting a standard brick. Temperature control in food and drinks manufacture is crucial to our general health and well-being. So, just how old is this measurement thing anyway? Well, over 3,000 years ago, the Egyptians measured stone blocks for their pyramids using the cubit. The Saxons in Europe used to measure length in rods, which were 16 men's feet. But whose feet did they use? Then we had the Cape foot, also known as the Rhineland foot in Holland, and which was slightly longer than the English foot. The Cape foot, introduced by early Dutch settlers, was still used in parts of South Africa until 1965, when we went metric. Standardized measurements are crucial in today's world, especially when we trade across borders. You need to know how much you are selling, and your customers overseas need to know how much they are buying. Without this certainty, international trade would be much more difficult, if not impossible. Before the French Revolution in France, the existing system of measurement was unpopular. It was replaced by a decimal system. Measurement was, for the first time, based on constants of nature. This was called the metric system, and the meter and the kilogram came into our lives. For example, the meter was defined as being 1/10 millionth of the distance between the North Pole and the equator on a line through Paris. A gram was defined as the mass of 1 cubic centimeter of pure, that is distilled, water at 4 degrees Celsius. A liter was defined as the volume taken by a cubic decimeter of water, that is 10 times 10 times 10 centimeters. A kilogram was defined as the mass of 1 liter of pure, that is distilled water, at 4 degrees Celsius. Accurate prototypes for the meter and kilogram were made of platinum to resemble these constants. These prototypes became the international standard for length and mass held at the International Bureau of Weights and Measures in Paris. Today, global commerce is supported by accurate measurements based on the metric system. The list of original 17 countries that signed the Meter Convention in 1875 has now grown to 95 countries around the world. South Africa joined the convention in 1964, and by 2013, 6 more countries in Southern Africa had also joined the network. It has now grown to a truly international system of units called the Système International, which now also includes temperature, color, electrical, time, and chemical measurements. NMISA is the national agency that is responsible for metrology in South Africa. So, what is it that we do? Well, we make sure that when 1 kilogram is measured, it is as close as possible to a true 1 kilogram. The kilogram standard weight that inspectors and calibration laboratories use to check your local shop scales are in turn compared with our own accurate 1 kilogram weight. Our weight is kept in our vaults, but we have to check our 1 kilogram weight to make sure it's still accurate. Every 10 years or so, we take our standard weight to Paris and compare it to the international prototype, which is kept at the International Bureau of Weights and Measures in Paris. And that, in a nutshell, is what metrology is all about. There is, however, a postscript to our tale. Only the kilogram weights are still taken to Paris. Today, most measurements are carried out using what are called realizations of fundamental constants. For example, a meter is now defined as the distance that light travels in 1/300 millionth of a second in a vacuum. And our measurement can be easily compared with that of other national metrology institutes. Okay, now that we know what metrology is, how does it support your business? Metrology is one of the 5 components of the quality infrastructure, which in South Africa is called the technical infrastructure. The 5 components are metrology, voluntary and compulsory standards, testing, certification, which is the adherence to a standard, and accreditation, or the third-party verification of your ability to do something. Together, the 5 pillars of the technical infrastructure provide everything we need to ensure that our products and services are of the required quality and level of safety for global trade and safe consumption. The technical infrastructure protects our health and our environment. The technical infrastructure supports our entire economy. So far, so good. So, why are these 5 pillars of the technical infrastructure important to you? How do they help you in your business? As an example, let's take a look at a wine farm. Wine producers use pesticides to control pests in the vineyard. Grapes are washed, but residues can remain and can find their way into the wine. For the sake of our health, it's important that wine doesn't exceed permitted pesticide levels that are defined by international agreement, so it is mandatory to test wines for this. Acme Laboratory has been asked to test our wine for residual pesticide levels. But how do we know that Acme Laboratory is technically competent to test for pesticide residues? We'd better check their accreditation certificate from SANAS. And how does Acme Laboratory ensure that there is traceability for their measurements? Well, Acme uses certified reference materials produced by NMISA to calibrate their measuring instruments. After all, a key part of the lab's accreditation is their ability to demonstrate measurement traceability. There's one last thing though. The label says that the cultivar in the bottle is Chardonnay. How do we know this is true? Well, in terms of the 1989 Liquor Products Act, the cultivar may only appear on the label of a certified wine. So, off the bottle goes to the Wine and Spirits Board for certification for sensory evaluation, performed against certified standards of wine. The good news is that we can now be sure that our batch of wine is fit for export, and that it will be well received by our customers overseas as well as in South Africa. And that's how the 5 pillars of our technical infrastructure support you, your business, and our economy. So, for small manufacturers, what are the key measurement domains and why are they important? They are length, mass, volume, temperature, and environmental health and safety. Let's go for a visit to Tsepo's bakery and see why these measurements are important. If the volume of milk going into the dough mixture is incorrect, you are going to be baking buns that are either oversized or undersized, with customer unhappiness, or worse, receiving a visit from the authority. Mass is important when mixing your dough and adding dry ingredients such as flour. To ensure that we are using the right mass of each ingredient, we check the mass using a scale that has been accurately calibrated using a measurement that is traceable to the national standard at NMISA. While on the subject of mixing, how can you be sure that the water that you are using is not polluted with high pesticide levels or bacteria such as E. coli? Regular testing by an accredited laboratory with competent staff is the best way to check for this. Metered measurement of length is quite interesting when making baguette. Imagine the cost if they are too long, or worse, your customers' reactions when they are too short. The need for accurate temperatures in our bakery is all too obvious. If your oven doesn't operate at 180 degrees Celsius, then your bread is going to be either undercooked or overcooked and burnt. Either way, your customers will very quickly be taking their money elsewhere. But here's the important bit. How can you be sure that your oven's temperature gauge is indeed accurate? When it says 180 degrees on the gauge, is it really 180 degrees inside and not 250 or 270 degrees? Once again, the importance of accurate traceable measurement is demonstrated. This ensures that there is an unbroken chain of comparisons between your oven's temperature gauge and the temperature measurements at NMISA, giving you peace of mind. And our measurements are compared against our international peers and global standards. This is what traceability is all about. So, what does good measurement mean in practice? We often refer to the 6 key rules for good measurement. These are: perform the right measurements, use the right measuring tools, use competent staff to measure, review measurement performance, make sure that you have traceability, and follow the right procedures. So, let's do a quick recap. Firstly, if you want to be a successful business, you have to make and sell quality products. Accurate measurements are the way to achieve this.